In the hushed corridors of knowledge, where whispers of the past linger among the stacks, Scarier Things brings you 3 true horror stories from the most unsuspecting of places, the library. These are not your typical ghost stories. They are disturbing accounts of true stalkers and chilling scares that will make you question every shadow you see between the bookshelves. Prepare to be unsettled by these scary true stories that prove sometimes the truest terror lies within the pages of a book and the silent halls of a library. Story 1. During my time at university, I was enrolled in 6 subjects each semester as I was pursuing a double degree. My goal was to complete it within 4 years. This resulted in numerous semesters where I was overwhelmed with assignments and constant studying. The university library, which was open until midnight, became my refuge. In addition to my academic load, I was also interning that semester, leaving me with little time for anything else. I was living on campus at the time, and my roommates could be quite noisy and disruptive. One Wednesday night, after attending 3 classes in my internship, I headed straight to the library. I had 2 exams the next day and planned to study until midnight. By 11 p.m., the library was mostly empty, except for a few people. I was seated at a table nestled between 2 bookshelves, offering some privacy and fewer distractions. Around this time, a man who appeared to be in his late 20s entered the area. Ignoring the other vacant tables, he chose to sit diagonally across from me at my table. He smiled at me as he placed his books on the table. I returned the smile and tried to concentrate on my studies, wondering why he had chosen to sit at my table. While I was reviewing my study materials on my laptop, the man interrupted me to ask if I was enrolled in a particular economics course. I politely told him I wasn't, hoping that would end the conversation. However, he continued to talk, complaining about his so-called professor who gave surprise quizzes every day. I empathized with him and then tried to refocus on my studies. Despite my efforts, I found it hard to concentrate, distracted by the man's presence. I had a feeling he would continue to try and engage me in conversation. He then asked for my name, to which I responded with a made-up name, Chelsea. He complimented my blue eyes, which made me question his intentions. His age, which seemed to be close to 30, added to my discomfort. I asked him for the name of his economics professor, to which he responded, Professor Davis. When I asked for the professor's first name, he said he didn't know. I quickly searched for any professors named Davis at our university on randomyprofessor.com, but only found a calculus professor whose last reviews were years old. Feeling uneasy, I decided to seek help from the security guard at the front door. As I stood up, I could feel the man's gaze on me as I walked over to the security guard and explained my situation. The security guard accompanied me back to the table and asked the man for his student ID. The man searched his wallet and pockets and then claimed he must have left it in his dorm. When asked which dorm building he lived in, the man couldn't provide an answer and eventually claimed he couldn't remember the name. The security guard escorted the man out of the library and advised me to be careful while returning to my dorm. I thanked him and tried to refocus on my studies, but my mind was preoccupied with the encounter. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night and headed back to my dorm. As I was walking through the nearly deserted campus, I heard a distinct sound of a shoe hitting the concrete behind me. I turned around but saw no one. I knew I had heard a footstep, so I started to run. As soon as I did, I heard running footsteps behind me. I turned to see the man from the library sprinting towards me. I screamed, but was quickly silenced as I was tackled to the ground, and a hand was placed over my mouth. He threatened to kill me if I made a noise. I genuinely believed my life was in danger. Despite his hand over my mouth, I tried to scream for help. He then stood up and began to drag me by the throat towards the woods near the dorms. I managed to remove his hand from my mouth long enough to scream again. This caught the attention of 2 guys who ran over, yelling at the man. He let go of me and ran off towards the woods. The two guys came over to me, and I'm sure they were asking if I was okay. But I was in shock and blocked out all noise for a few moments. I broke down and started crying uncontrollably. They called the university police, and I tried to compose myself to explain what had happened. We went to the library to get a description of the man from the security guard, which matched my description. The police were able to use the library's security cameras to get a clear image of the man's face. The image was sent to all students' phones and emails and posted on the school website. That same night, an anonymous tip led the police to a late-night bar down the road from the school, where the man was arrested. The trauma this incident caused was immense. I can't even begin to imagine the trauma experienced by those who weren't as fortunate in similar situations. Story 2. We relocated to a different city when I was 7 years old. I consider any recollections prior to that move to be from my early childhood, and many of those memories are now hazy. This is one such memory. This incident occurred at an age before 7, probably when I was around 5 or 6 years old. Our mother would frequently take my brothers and me to the local town library, which was just a few blocks away. I recall one day when it was just my mom and my little brother, who was a toddler at that time. We began the day at the mall, likely spending hours there accompanying our mom while she shopped. Whenever we visited this mall, she would always treat us to ice cream cones from the McDonald's inside the mall. I remember getting ice cream on this particular day because I still had some of the cone left in my hand as we headed to the library after leaving the mall. Upon arriving at the library, there was a children's computer section where my mom would let me stay and play computer games while she went about her business. When I grew tired of playing the online computer games available at the time, I got up and began walking through the aisles of books in the children's section of the library, searching for the I Spy books. The children's section was located in the far corner of the library. As I was moving from aisle to aisle, I heard a sound from behind me. I turned around and saw nothing. I was facing the back wall of the library, which had another bookshelf leaning against it. Then I saw half of a grown man's face peek around the shelf and say peekaboo. I remember laughing and feeling no sense of danger. He did it again, disappearing behind the shelf, then peering out his head again and saying peekaboo. I laughed again. He asked me what I was looking for, and I told him the I Spy books. He offered to help me find them. He came over, took my hand, and started leading me through the aisles, presumably to the section of books that began with the letter I. And there they were, at least 5 I Spy books lined up next to each other. I picked up my favorite one, the treasure hunt one. He suggested we sit down and play. He led me to a table in the corner by a couple of children's computers, and we began looking through the pictures. This continued for some time, and he was asking me questions about myself as we played I Spy. The question that still stands out to me the most is, who are you here with? I told him my mom and little brother. At some point after this, he mentioned something about a children's playroom downstairs. I was unaware at that age that there was a downstairs to the library. He said we could take the book down there. He led me to the door that led to the basement of the library, which is actually where events and meetings for certain clubs and organizations are held. There is indeed a small playroom down there, presumably for parents who have to bring their kids with them during any of the meetings. The man led me to that little playroom. There were various toys in there, most notably a Lego set and a Lego table. And then there were a bunch of chairs. He placed the I Spy book on the Lego table. This is where things start to get really uncomfortable in retrospect. As he was trying to forcefully get me to play with the toys, I started to feel uncomfortable. Around this time, a female librarian announced over the intercom, "Will Liam come to the front? Please, your mother's looking for you." At this point, the man wanted to turn off the lights in the room, and now it was pitch black inside. He said in the dark, "We're gonna play hide and seek." This was the first moment I was genuinely scared, and I started to yell for my mom. I remember he kept telling me to be quiet, and his voice was getting louder as he was getting closer to me in the dark until he had his hands on me. I thankfully managed to run past him and out the door of that room. And I ran down the dark hallway back to the stairs. And as I was running up the stairs, I had that same childhood feeling of running up the basement stairs after turning off the lights only 100 times worse, because I genuinely was scared I was going to be grabbed. I made it back to the main floor of the library and ran straight to the front desk calling for my mom. She was at the front desk with a group of librarians, and I remember the relief on my mom's face when she saw me. I told her there was some man who took me downstairs, and she literally lost it. The next thing I remember from there was a bunch of police in the building searching around, but I never saw that man again. He must have exited the building through a different way. I remember speaking to some woman who was probably with the police asking me very delicate questions. I never really asked my mom about this experience that many times because it's very uncomfortable, and I'd rather just not think of it. Story 3. In my early 20s, I used to be employed at the local community library. I would work the evening shifts as a secondary job, typically 3 times a week, following my primary job. My shift would start at 6 and end at 9, the library's closing time. I was also responsible for securing the premises after closing. However, my duties didn't end immediately after the library closed. I had to power down all the computers, clean and organize the place, restock the shelves with all the returned books and DVDs from the day, and dispose of the garbage before I could leave. One Friday night, as closing time approached, most of the other library staff had already left. It was just me and one of the female librarians remaining. I had made a few final call announcements to the remaining library patrons, informing them that the library would be closing soon. I was already tidying up the place, hoping to finish early so I could start my weekend. The remaining employees bid me farewell as soon as the clock hit 9 o'clock. I announced over the intercom that the library was now closed. The 2 remaining guests packed up their belongings and exited the building. After ensuring that no one else was in the building, I locked the front door. I then began arranging all the chairs neatly under their respective tables. Next, I started emptying all the trash cans. When it was time to take them outside to the dumpster on the side, I unlocked the front door again and took them out. The library was somewhat secluded from any main roads, and it was quiet outside. When I returned inside, I locked the door again. Now, all I had left to do was restock all the returned books and DVDs from the day. I picked up the 2 boxes and started with the DVDs, which was easier since the DVD section was smaller. This task took about 5 to 10 minutes. During this time, I was certain I heard a noise coming from one of the book aisles. I began walking through the aisles until I found an open book lying on the floor, which had clearly just fallen off the shelf. I returned it to its place. For a moment, I stood there, wondering how that could have happened. I resumed my work. After finishing with the DVDs, I took the box of books and began placing them back on the shelves one by one, in alphabetical order. I started with the A's. The books in the box were sorted alphabetically to make the task easier. As I worked my way down the shelves, trying to finish quickly and go home, I heard another noise nearby. Twice in less than 20 minutes was no coincidence. I put the box down and started walking through the aisles of books again. I found another 2 books on the ground in another aisle. Someone was in here. I walked out to the open area with all the tables and yelled out, "Excuse me, the library is closed." There was silence until I heard a noise from across the library, from the children's section. I approached the noise, which started to sound like some rabid animal making growling sounds. I also heard books being thrown onto the floor. It was coming from one aisle. As I gathered the courage to peek down the aisle, I saw a woman wearing a nightgown, throwing random books off the shelf, making these disgusting animal-like sounds. I didn't say anything. I turned and ran to the office where we had the phone. I didn't have a cell phone at this time. I locked the office door and closed the blinds to the window. Then I called 911. I reported that there was a sickly woman in the library and suggested they send an ambulance. They asked if I had approached the woman, and I said no. She looked like she could be dangerous. When the operator asked me if the woman was still in the same spot, I opened the blinds and screamed because that woman was right on the other side of the glass, looking in. Her pupils were so large that she looked demonic. I told the operator, "She's right outside the office." The woman started banging on the glass, screaming gibberish. She tried opening the door, and when it didn't open, she turned around and sat on a chair facing the office. The operator asked me to keep the blind open and watch her. The woman was wobbly as she sat down, so I knew that she was definitely high out of her mind. 2 police cars and an ambulance arrived at the library. The woman was handcuffed because she tried fighting the police officers, but nothing she was saying made any sense. She was put in the back of an ambulance and taken away. I never found out what she was on. I don't know how she got inside. Maybe while I was taking the garbage out, or maybe she was inside before I even locked the place up. Either way, it definitely made being in the library alone after closing quite unsettling from there on out.